It's been said that the art of business consists in identifying assets in low-valued uses and finding profitable ways to move those assets from lower to higher valued uses. Now, value requires a judgment or a discernment of costs and benefits. We always want to focus on the relevant costs and the relevant benefits and ignore the benefits and costs that are not relevant. In this lecture, we'll talk about some of the more common ways that individuals pay attention to the wrong costs or ignore the right costs when focusing in on value from an economic perspective. So the three key things I'd like to discuss are the fixed and the cost or the sunk cost fallacy, the hidden cost fallacy, and then a couple of other psychological biases. Again, when making decisions, you should always consider the costs and the benefits that vary with the consequence of the decision you're making, and only those costs and benefits that vary with the consequence of your decision. If you ever become confused from an economic standpoint when considering costs and benefits, always refocus on the decision, the economic decision being made, and that will help direct your attention to the costs and the benefits that are relevant. Relevant costs and benefits are those that vary with the consequence of a decision. From an economic standpoint, we want to consider only those costs and benefits that vary with the consequence of a decision. So all costs and benefits that vary are the ones we want to be focused on, and only the costs and benefits that vary with the consequence of our decision. If and when you become confused in an economic decision-making context, it's very often helpful to refocus and step back and focus on the decision, the economic decision that's being made. Very often that will help clarify what are and are not the relevant costs and benefits. There are really only two possible mistakes that one can make: incorporating the irrelevant costs when making a decision, or ignoring the relevant costs. We'll refer to the first as the fixed cost or the sunk cost fallacy, often because costs that are fixed or sunk, meaning already invested and cannot be changed, will not vary with the consequence of a decision. The hidden cost fallacy is what we will use as a term we'll use to refer to the second instance, ignoring relevant costs that may be hidden or obscured from view, but nevertheless do vary with the consequence of a decision. Here's an example of the sunk cost fallacy from The Psychology of Sunk Cost by Hal Arks and Catherine Bloomer, two well-known psychologists. An experiment was run at the Ohio State University theater program. Season ticket holders subscribed at the beginning of the year, agreeing to pay a certain price for their season tickets. Discounts were then randomly applied and mailed to various season ticket holders or various customers who'd applied for season tickets. In one group, they received essentially no discount and were required to pay the face value of $15 per ticket. Now that's what they'd agreed to pay in the first place, so no real surprise there. Group 2 received a $2 discount, and Group 3 received $7 off each ticket. Now here's the interesting thing, or one interesting thing. All of these individuals agreed at the beginning of the season to pay the $15 per ticket, and all of them agreed to subscribe to the entire season of events. Presumably, all of them valued the ability to attend the event at least $15 per event or more. What they found, very interestingly, was that those who actually ended up paying more attended more. In other words, what you paid ended up influencing your decision to attend, not your objective value at the beginning of the year. Those who had paid more, paid the full price, tended to attend events more often, and particularly in instances where the weather was relatively inclement and other ticket holders who had paid less decided to stay home. Even though the cost of those tickets was already sunk, all of the individuals, whether they paid $7 or $13 or $15 per ticket, had already paid for those tickets. So on the night of, say, a big snowstorm, the decision to go or not go really didn't depend, or at least shouldn't have depended, on how much they paid for the tickets. But in fact, Arks and Bloomer found that it did. People paid attention to a sunk cost, a cost that was paid and gone, even though that didn't have any direct bearing on the immediate cost of going out and attending the lecture. So, quick recap. Costs can be broken down into variable and fixed costs. The sum of those two equals the total cost. Accounting profit and economic profit are two very important types of profit. Accounting profit, or net income, fails to make visible a very important cost, namely the cost of equity capital. Economic profit is equal to the accounting profit, or net income, minus the dollar cost of equity capital. Paying only attention to accounting profit ignores a relevant cost, so would be an example of the hidden cost fallacy. Whereas paying attention to economic profit, which makes that cost visible, would be the more appropriate measure to use from an economic standpoint. The sunk cost fallacy or fixed cost fallacy refers to situations where people pay attention to costs that do not vary with the consequence of the decision being made, but nevertheless allow those costs to influence the decision. The hidden cost fallacy is the opposite. It describes instances when people fail to incorporate relevant costs, or costs that they should be paying attention to, which do vary with the consequence of the economic decision being made. There are a number of other psychological biases, and I'd encourage you to keep your eyes open, always paying attention to situations and asking yourself, do these costs vary or not vary with the consequence of the economic decision that I am making? Thanks for listening to this lecture on various cost fallacies.